A math teacher captivates a crowd of 14,000 people, not with the latest pop song or a Bollywood dance, but with algebra and geometry. Welcome to the origin story of BYJU'S, a man who transformed from a small-time tutor into the face of India's biggest EdTech empire, BYJU'S. What started as revolutionary online education has become a cautionary tale of ambition, overexpansion, and shattered promises. How did a company, once valued at $22 billion, see a 99% drop? Buckle up as we dive into the rise and shocking collapse of BYJU'S. This is the AI Lib. Picture this: 14,000 students, parents, and teachers crammed into Delhi's Indira Gandhi Indoor Stadium. Not for a cricket match or a movie premiere, but for a math class. The person they came to see was not a pop star, but a humble man from Kerala named BYJU'S. Born in 1980, BYJU wasn't your average student. While most kids were dreaming of cricket stardom or getting good grades to please their parents, BYJU was in love with two things: sports and mathematics. His parents, both teachers, nurtured his passion for learning, but they also pushed him toward a more respectable career. Like every good middle-class Indian family in the 80s and 90s, they saw two possible futures for their son: medicine or engineering. BYJU picked engineering, and in 2000, he graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering, landing a job in a shipping company. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Just 2 years into his career, a few friends asked BYJU to help them prepare for the Common Admission Test (CAT), the gateway to India's top business schools. What started as casual tutoring sessions turned into something much bigger. Not only did BYJU'S friends ace the exam, but BYJU himself, out of curiosity, took the CAT and scored a perfect 100%. Twice. Instead of joining a prestigious IIM, BYJU realized something life-changing. He was born to teach. The thrill he got from breaking down complex concepts into simple, understandable parts was more rewarding than any high-paying corporate job. In 2006, with nothing but a whiteboard and his passion for teaching, BYJU started his own classes, aptly named BYJU'S Classes, where he helped students crack competitive exams like the CAT. His teaching style was different. It was fun, interactive, and most importantly, practical. Students weren't just memorizing formulas. They were learning how to think. Soon enough, word spread, and BYJU'S small classroom wasn't big enough to contain the growing demand. He began teaching in auditoriums, with over 1,200 students attending his sessions at a time. His first class was always free, but once students experienced his engaging teaching methods, they were hooked. 9 out of 10 signed up for his paid courses. It wasn't long before BYJU expanded his classes to other major cities like Mumbai, Pune, and Bengaluru. His unique approach to education was revolutionary in a country where rote memorization had long been the norm. But it wasn't just about teaching for BYJU. He saw the potential of technology in transforming education on a scale never seen before. By 2009, he began broadcasting his lessons via satellite, using VSAT, very small aperture terminal, technology to reach students in 45 cities. This was the beginning of his transformation from a beloved teacher to the founder of a rapidly growing EdTech empire. By 2011, he officially founded Think and Learn Private Limited, the parent company behind BYJU'S, with a clear mission: to bring top-quality education to every student in India, regardless of location. But as his business grew, so did his ambitions. He wasn't satisfied with just being a top test prep teacher. BYJU wanted to revolutionize the entire education system. His goal? To reach millions of students, not just in India but around the world. And to do that, he needed something bigger than classroom sessions and satellite broadcasts. He needed an app. BYJU'S had already proven that he could pack auditoriums with students eager to learn, but how could he scale his business to reach millions of students across India? The answer came in the form of the freemium model, a brilliant business strategy that allowed BYJU'S to expand rapidly while making education accessible to the masses. The idea was simple: offer the first class for free to get students interested. Once they experienced BYJU'S unique teaching style, most of them would pay for additional classes. And the numbers backed him up. 9 out of 10 students who attended a free class signed up for the paid ones. But it wasn't just the free classes that hooked students. BYJU'S teaching style was unlike anything Indian students had seen before. He wasn't just preparing them to pass exams. He was teaching them how to learn. He focused on understanding concepts deeply, rather than the typical rote memorization that dominated the Indian education system. This approach was a game changer. For the first time, students were learning not just to score marks, but to truly grasp the subject matter. As demand grew, BYJU realized he couldn't keep traveling from city to city to teach in person. He needed to scale, and the only way to do that was by going digital. That's when he turned to VSAT technology, a satellite-based system that allowed him to broadcast his classes to multiple cities at once. By 2009, he was delivering lectures to students in 45 different cities, reaching thousands of students simultaneously. This was the first step in taking BYJU'S from a regional tutoring business to a national powerhouse. But BYJU wasn't satisfied with just reaching a few thousand students. He had his eyes set on a much bigger prize. He wanted to reach millions. And that's where technology came in. In 2011, he officially founded Think and Learn Private Limited with a bold vision: to create a platform that would bring top-quality education to every student in India, regardless of their location. And in 2015, that vision became a reality with the launch of the BYJU'S Learning app. The freemium model remained at the core of BYJU'S business strategy, even as the company expanded into the digital realm. The app was free to download, and students could access certain lessons for free. But to unlock the full range of content and features, they had to subscribe. This model was a huge hit with parents, who were willing to pay for an app that promised to help their children excel in school and in competitive exams. By the time 2015 rolled around, BYJU'S wasn't just a tutoring service. It was an educational powerhouse on the verge of changing the way India learned. The BYJU'S Learning app was the culmination of years of hard work, innovation, and strategic planning. BYJU Ravindran had a clear vision: to make learning accessible, engaging, and, believe it or not, fun. And with the launch of the app, he did just that. Here's the thing. Indian students were already spending countless hours glued to their smartphones, whether for games, movies, or social media. BYJU'S genius was in recognizing that if students could spend hours playing mobile games, they could also use that time to study, if the content was just as engaging. So, he hired a team of experts, including motion graphics artists, 3D animators, and even musicians, to create educational content that wasn't just informative, but also visually and orally captivating. The result? An app that felt more like a video game than a traditional classroom. Lessons were delivered through interactive videos, complete with animations, quizzes, and real-time feedback. Students could study at their own pace, revisit difficult topics, and, here's the kicker, actually enjoy learning. Whether it was math, science, or history, BYJU'S made every subject feel accessible and exciting. But it wasn't just about flashy animations and cool graphics. The app was rooted in solid educational principles. BYJU'S focus had always been on helping students understand core concepts rather than just memorizing facts. This approach was particularly appealing to Indian parents, who had long been frustrated with the country's emphasis on rote learning. The BYJU'S app promised to teach their children how to think critically, solve problems, and apply their knowledge in real-world scenarios, skills that were sorely lacking in the traditional education system. As word spread, so did the app's popularity. Within months of its launch, the BYJU'S Learning app had millions of downloads, and the company was flooded with positive reviews. Parents praised the app for helping their children improve their grades, while students loved the interactive, game-like lessons that made studying feel less like a chore and more like an adventure. And it wasn't just Indian students who were benefiting from the app. BYJU'S quickly expanded its reach beyond India, with students from all over the world downloading the app and using it to prepare for exams like the SAT, GRE, and GMAT. The company was no longer just a national success story, it was going global. But with great success came even greater expectations. Investors, sensing the massive potential of BYJU'S, poured millions of dollars into the company. Sequoia Capital and Mark Zuckerberg's Chan Zuckerberg Initiative were just two of the high-profile investors who backed the company, helping it secure over $100 million in funding. With this influx of capital, BYJU'S had the resources to expand even further, and BYJU'S vision of creating a global education empire seemed within reach. Yet, as the app grew in popularity and the company scaled rapidly, cracks in the foundation began to appear. BYJU'S was no longer just a scrappy startup with a passion for teaching. It had become a corporate juggernaut driven by the relentless pursuit of growth. And while the app continued to dominate the EdTech market, behind the scenes, the company was facing mounting pressure to deliver results, both in terms of user growth and financial performance. This is where things started to go wrong. As BYJU'S app skyrocketed in popularity, the company faced a new challenge: how to convert millions of free users into paying customers. Initially, the freemium model worked wonders, but it wasn't enough. With a massive workforce and ambitious growth targets, BYJU'S needed a more aggressive strategy. And so, they built a sales machine unlike anything the Indian EdTech space had ever seen. Picture this. A parent downloads the BYJU'S app after seeing a charming ad on TV. Their child starts with free lessons, and within a few days, a BYJU'S salesperson calls, offering a free consultation. That's where the real sales pitch begins. The salesperson arrives at the family's home with a tablet, sits down with the parents and child, and conducts a mini assessment. After a few tricky questions designed to stump the child, the parent is left worried. How will my child pass their exams if they can't answer such simple questions? The salesperson asks. Then, they show a high-quality BYJU'S video, where the very same concept is broken down clearly, and suddenly, the child can answer the question. Impressed by this miracle, the parents are then offered a tempting 50% scholarship to sign up on the spot. If they hesitate, the salesperson sweetens the deal with a money-back guarantee. It was a masterclass in psychological salesmanship. Fear and guilt were the driving forces behind many of these sales. And it worked. BYJU'S was closing deals left and right. Parents, terrified of their children falling behind in India's highly competitive education system, were willing to pay thousands for a subscription. The company's aggressive sales model was so effective that, at one point, BYJU'S was hiring fresh engineering graduates in droves and training them to become part of their ever-expanding sales force. These young recruits, many of them fresh out of college, were given high-pressure targets. They were expected to close a certain number of sales each week, and if they failed to meet their quotas, they risked losing their jobs. The pressure was immense, and the tactics used by some salespeople became increasingly questionable. Reports began to surface of parents being misled, manipulated, or even coerced into signing contracts they didn't fully understand. In some cases, salespeople were accused of offering misleading information about refund policies, making it nearly impossible for dissatisfied customers to get their money back. Behind the scenes, the company's culture was becoming toxic. Employees in the sales department worked long hours, often spending 14 hours a day chasing leads, making cold calls, and attending sales meetings. Lunch breaks were discouraged unless sales targets were met. The relentless focus on growth led to an environment where many felt disposable, and turnover rates were high. But for those who succeeded, the rewards were significant. Top-performing salespeople were offered hefty bonuses, while those who failed were quickly shown the door. Despite these internal issues, the strategy was paying off. BYJU'S continued to grow at an astronomical rate, attracting the attention of more investors and venture capital firms. By 2018, the company's valuation had crossed the $1 billion mark, making it India's first EdTech unicorn. And by 2020, BYJU'S was on track to becoming a global player, with plans to expand its operations to other countries. But while the sales machine was roaring, cracks were starting to appear. The aggressive tactics that had driven growth were also sowing the seeds of distrust. Parents, once enthusiastic about BYJU'S, began to feel that the company was more focused on making a sale than on providing quality education. Complaints about high-pressure sales tactics, misleading information, and poor customer service were mounting. And as these stories began to circulate in the media, BYJU'S reputation took a hit. With BYJU'S growing at breakneck speed, the venture capital world was watching closely. Investors saw the company's rapid rise as a golden opportunity to get in on the ground floor of what they believed could be the future of global education. After all, BYJU'S wasn't just a tutoring app anymore. It was a tech-powered learning platform poised to dominate the EdTech landscape. The funding frenzy that followed was nothing short of staggering. In 2016, Mark Zuckerberg's Chan Zuckerberg Initiative invested $50 million in BYJU'S. This marked a turning point for the company. Not only was it now backed by one of the most influential figures in Silicon Valley, but it also gave BYJU'S the credibility to attract even more big-name investors. Sequoia Capital, Tencent, and General Atlantic all jumped on board, pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into the company. By 2018, BYJU'S had raised over $540 million in funding, making it one of the most well-funded EdTech startups in the world. The influx of capital allowed BYJU'S to scale its operations at an unprecedented rate. With millions of dollars in the bank, BYJU'S Ravindran began eyeing international expansion. The company's goal was simple: to become the largest education company in the world. And with investors lining up to pour more money into the business, that goal seemed well within reach. One of BYJU'S key strategies during this time was to acquire smaller edtech companies that could help it enter new markets and offer new services. The first major acquisition came in 2017 when BYJU'S bought TutorVista and Edurite, two edtech companies focused on the K-12 segment. This move gave BYJU'S a strong foothold in the school education space, allowing it to expand its offerings beyond test preparation. But the real game-changer came in 2020, when BYJU'S acquired White Hat Jr. for a staggering $300 million. White Hat Jr. was a coding platform that offered live, one-on-one coding classes for kids. The acquisition was part of BYJU'S broader strategy to tap into the growing demand for coding education, which had become a hot topic in the tech industry. Parents, eager to prepare their children for a future dominated by technology, were willing to pay top dollar for coding classes, and BYJU'S saw this as a massive opportunity. The acquisition of White Hat Jr. was a bold move, but it wasn't without its risks. While the platform had grown rapidly, it had also faced criticism for its aggressive marketing tactics and questionable teaching methods. Some critics accused White Hat Jr. of preying on parents' fears about their children falling behind in the digital age, using scare tactics to sell expensive coding packages. But despite the controversy, BYJU'S pushed forward, confident that the acquisition would pay off in the long run. And it wasn't just White Hat Jr. that BYJU'S snapped up during this period. The company also acquired other edtech startups like Great Learning, Akash Educational Services, and Topper. Each acquisition was part of a carefully crafted strategy to build a comprehensive, end-to-end learning platform that catered to students of all ages, from kindergarten to postgraduate levels. With each new acquisition, BYJU'S was inching closer to its goal of becoming the dominant player in global education. By 2021, the company's valuation had soared to an eye-watering $22 billion, making it one of the most valuable edtech companies on the planet. Investors were thrilled, and BYJU'S seemed unstoppable. But behind the scenes, there were growing concerns about whether the company could sustain its rapid growth. In early 2020, the world faced an unexpected disruption that brought life to a halt. Schools closed their doors, and millions of students were left scrambling to find ways to continue their education from home. For BYJU'S, this massive shift wasn't just a challenge. It was an unparalleled opportunity. As traditional schooling systems struggled to adapt, online learning platforms suddenly became indispensable. And BYJU'S, with its already established digital infrastructure, was perfectly positioned to meet the demand. Recognizing the potential of this new reality, BYJU'S made a strategic move. They offered free access to their learning app for a limited period. This decision was both generous and brilliant. Parents, anxious about their children missing out on crucial education, rushed to download the app, and students who had never considered online learning were now fully immersed in it. BYJU'S saw an immediate spike in usage, with a 60% increase in app engagement. By the end of 2020, the company had gained more than 25 million new users. This wasn't just a temporary spike. BYJU'S had become a lifeline for students whose educational routines had been thrown into chaos. The app's personalized approach, offering tailored lessons, interactive videos, and quizzes, ensured that students could continue their education uninterrupted. It was no longer just about supplementing traditional schooling. For many, BYJU'S became the primary mode of learning, as it allowed students to study at their own pace, rewatch difficult lessons, and engage with content in a way that traditional classrooms often couldn't offer. But BYJU'S didn't just stop at making its content available for free. It took aggressive steps to expand its market share during this period. With schools closed indefinitely, the company launched a series of targeted marketing campaigns aimed at parents. The message was simple: BYJU'S could help your child keep up with their education during these uncertain times. The fear of children falling behind academically became a powerful motivator. and parents were more willing than ever to invest in their children's education. At the same time, BYJU'S saw this global shift as a golden opportunity to attract even more investors. Venture capital firms that had previously been on the fence about investing in EdTech were now eager to get in on the action. BYJU'S raised over $1 billion in funding during this period, with major players like Silver Lake, Tiger Global, and General Atlantic pouring money into the company. BYJU'S wasn't just riding the wave of demand. It was becoming a global force in the EdTech industry, solidifying its place as one of the world's most valuable education platforms. This sudden growth wasn't without its challenges, though. As millions of new users flooded the platform, BYJU'S had to scale its operations rapidly to keep up with demand. The company expanded its sales team, hired more teachers, and invested heavily in improving the platform's technology infrastructure. The stakes were high, and BYJU'S had no choice but to deliver. Parents were paying a premium for their children's education, and any slip-up, whether it was a tech glitch or a poorly designed lesson, could damage the company's reputation at a time when it was under the spotlight. Internally, BYJU'S was operating at full throttle. The company's workforce grew to over 58,000 employees by 2022, with new hires being brought on board at a frenetic pace. Everyone, from engineers to salespeople, was working around the clock to meet the company's growing needs. But with this rapid expansion came increasing pressure. Employees were working long hours, often under intense conditions, as BYJU'S raced to capitalize on the surge in online learning. The company's relentless focus on growth became a double-edged sword, driving success but also creating an unsustainable work environment for many. As the year progressed, BYJU'S continued to see remarkable growth. By mid-2021, the company's user base had ballooned to over 80 million, with 5.5 million of those users opting for paid subscriptions. The numbers were staggering, and BYJU'S wasn't just an Indian success story anymore. It was a global juggernaut. With millions of students across the world relying on its platform, BYJU'S had firmly cemented itself as a leader in the digital education space. However, the company's meteoric rise came with its own set of challenges. While BYJU'S was scaling at an unprecedented rate, the global disruption was also beginning to show signs of easing. Schools were reopening, and parents and students were eager to return to traditional classroom environments. The sudden surge in demand for online learning began to slow down, and BYJU'S faced the difficult task of retaining the millions of users it had gained during the peak of the crisis. This raised an important question. Could BYJU'S continue to grow and thrive in a post-crisis world, or had the company's explosive growth been merely a temporary boost? As students returned to their classrooms and the world began to return to a sense of normalcy, BYJU'S faced the challenge of proving that online learning wasn't just a stopgap solution but a viable, long-term alternative to traditional education. After nearly 2 years of educational upheaval, traditional schools started reopening, and the demand for online learning began to wane. For parents and students who had spent months in front of screens, the allure of physical classrooms, with their face-to-face interactions, structured routines, and hands-on learning, was hard to resist. In-person learning offered something that digital platforms, no matter how sophisticated, simply couldn't replicate: human connection. BYJU'S, which had thrived during the height of the global disruption, now faced the challenge of keeping its vast user base engaged. As students returned to their physical classrooms, many began to abandon their online courses. Parents, too, were eager to see their children back in a more traditional learning environment, where teachers could provide direct supervision and personalized feedback. Suddenly, BYJU'S found itself competing not just with other edtech companies, but with the very thing it had aimed to replace: the classroom. This shift posed a significant challenge for BYJU'S. The company had built its brand on the promise that online education was not just a supplement but the future of learning. Its marketing campaigns had positioned BYJU'S as a more flexible, personalized, and effective alternative to traditional schooling. But now, with students flocking back to brick-and-mortar institutions, that narrative was starting to unravel. One of the key issues that arose was the lack of accountability in online learning. While BYJU'S had developed a robust platform that offered interactive lessons and quizzes, it couldn't replicate the discipline and structure of a physical classroom. Students, left to their own devices, often found it difficult to stay focused during online lessons. And for many parents, This lack of direct supervision became a growing concern. Unlike in a classroom, where a teacher could immediately address distractions and keep students on task, online learning placed much of the responsibility on the students' shoulders. For younger learners, in particular, this proved to be a significant hurdle. Another challenge was the growing awareness of the downsides of prolonged screen time. As the world emerged from the disruption, parents became increasingly concerned about the impact of excessive screen use on their children's health. Reports of digital fatigue, eye strain, and declining attention spans were on the rise, and many parents began to question whether the benefits of online learning outweighed the potential risks. For a company that had banked on the widespread adoption of digital education, this shift in perception was a wake-up call. Realizing that the tide was turning, BYJU'S made a surprising pivot. In late 2022, the company announced plans to invest $200 million in opening 500 offline tuition centers across India. The company that had once championed the future of online education was now doubling down on traditional, in-person learning. The move was a stark acknowledgement that, despite the advances in digital education, there was still a strong demand for face-to-face learning environments. BYJU'S offline tuition centers were designed to complement its online offerings, creating a hybrid model that combined the best of both worlds. Students could attend in-person classes for subjects that required more hands-on instruction, like math and science, while still accessing BYJU'S digital content for additional support. The idea was to create a seamless blend of online and offline learning, catering to the diverse needs of students and parents. But the question remained: could this hybrid model succeed in a market that was increasingly returning to its traditional roots? While the offline tuition centers attracted some interest, they also faced stiff competition from established tutoring centers and schools that were eager to reclaim their territory. Moreover, BYJU'S was no longer the only game in town. Other EdTech companies, recognizing the limitations of purely digital learning, had also begun to explore hybrid models. The battle for students' attention and parents' wallets was only just beginning. While BYJU'S had experienced an unprecedented rise to success, by 2022, the financial realities of its breakneck expansion were starting to come to light. Beneath the surface of skyrocketing valuations and aggressive growth, BYJU'S was facing a series of internal financial struggles that were becoming harder to hide. One of the key issues stemmed from BYJU'S acquisition spree. In its quest to dominate the EdTech space, the company had spent billions acquiring smaller companies like White Hat Jr., Akash Educational Services, and Epic. These acquisitions were meant to expand BYJU'S offerings beyond India and into international markets, as well as to diversify its product range. On paper, it seemed like a solid strategy. By buying up established brands in the education sector, BYJU'S could quickly scale its operations and offer new services, from coding classes to school tuitions. However, these acquisitions came at a steep price. Many of the companies BYJU'S purchased were overvalued, and integrating them into BYJU'S existing ecosystem proved more challenging than expected. For instance, White Hat Jr. faced significant backlash for its marketing practices, with parents accusing the company of exploiting their fears about the future of their children's education. Similarly, Akash, while a prestigious name in offline coaching, wasn't as easily merged with BYJU'S digital-first approach as the company had hoped. Worse still, BYJU'S had taken on massive loans to finance these acquisitions. The company borrowed over $1.2 billion from international lenders to fund its aggressive growth strategy, believing that the profits from these new ventures would offset the cost of the debt. But as the global economy began to slow down and the demand for online learning waned, BYJU'S found itself struggling to keep up with its loan payments. By mid-2022, BYJU'S debt was becoming a major concern. The company was burning through cash at an alarming rate, and its operating costs were outpacing its revenue growth. While BYJU'S had been able to secure massive funding during the peak of the EdTech boom, the investment landscape was changing. Venture capital firms, once eager to invest in fast-growing startups, were now becoming more cautious, especially as economic uncertainty loomed. Adding to the company's financial woes was the growing dissatisfaction among its customers. Reports of mis-selling, poor customer service, and difficulties in securing refunds were becoming more frequent. Parents who had initially been excited about the promise of BYJU'S were now wary of the company's aggressive sales tactics. The goodwill that had once driven BYJU'S success was quickly eroding, and the company's reputation was taking a hit. In September 2022, BYJU'S released its financial report for the fiscal year 2021, and the results were alarming. The company had posted a loss of 4,564 Indian rupees crore, almost double its revenue for that year. This was a staggering revelation, especially for a company that had been valued at $22 billion just a few months earlier. Investors and industry analysts began to question whether BYJU'S rapid growth was sustainable, or if the company was headed for a financial collapse. What was particularly troubling about the financial report was the source of BYJU'S revenue. Nearly 80% of the company's earnings came from the sale of tablets preloaded with BYJU'S courses, while only 20% came from actual course fees and subscriptions. This meant that, despite its positioning as an EdTech company, BYJU'S was more of a hardware seller than an education provider. The company's reliance on tablet sales raised questions about its long-term viability, especially as more affordable alternatives to BYJU'S began to emerge in the market. By the end of 2022, BYJU'S was not only facing financial challenges, but also a series of legal battles that would further destabilize the company. One of the most significant blows came when US-based lenders filed lawsuits against BYJU'S for defaulting on its $1.2 billion loan. These lenders claimed that BYJU'S had violated the terms of the loan agreement and demanded control of the company's assets, including its valuable subsidiaries. The legal disputes marked the beginning of a downward spiral for BYJU'S. The lawsuits not only drained the company's resources, but also severely damaged its reputation. Investors, already concerned about BYJU'S financial health, were now fleeing in droves. The company's valuation, once a source of pride, was plummeting. By early 2023, BYJU'S valuation had dropped from $22 billion to under $5 billion, a staggering decline for a company that had once been hailed as the future of global education. In addition to the lawsuits, BYJU'S faced increasing scrutiny from the Indian government. In April 2023, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs launched an investigation into BYJU'S financial and governance practices. The investigation raised questions about the company's accounting methods, its use of investor funds, and its compliance with corporate regulations. While the investigation was ongoing, it further eroded public trust in the company and contributed to the growing sense that BYJU'S was no longer the invincible EdTech giant it had once been. As BYJU'S grappled with these legal challenges, it also began to slash its workforce in a bid to cut costs. By June 2023, the company had laid off more than half of its employees, reducing its headcount from 58,000 to less than 25,000. These layoffs were a clear sign that BYJU'S was struggling to stay afloat. Former employees described a chaotic work environment, with little communication from leadership and a pervasive sense of uncertainty. Morale was at an all-time low, and many employees feared that the company's best days were behind it. The layoffs also had a ripple effect on BYJU'S operations. With fewer employees to manage its sprawling empire, the quality of customer service began to decline. Parents who had once praised BYJU'S for its innovative learning platform were now complaining about delayed responses, technical issues, and difficulties in accessing refunds. The once golden image of BYJU'S was tarnished beyond repair, and the company seemed unable or unwilling to address the growing list of grievances. In an attempt to stabilize its finances, BYJU'S announced that it would sell off some of its key assets. One of the most notable sales was its US-based learning platform, EdTech, which BYJU'S had acquired for $1 billion in 2021. By June 2023, the company was forced to sell EdTech for just $500 million, a loss of $500 million in less than 2 years. This fire sale of assets was a clear indication that BYJU'S was in desperate need of cash, and it raised concerns about whether the company would be able to survive much longer. The final nail in the coffin came in October 2023, when India's Enforcement Directorate, ED, issued a notice accusing BYJU'S of violating foreign exchange regulations to the tune of 9,000 Indian rupees crore. The ED's investigation was focused on BYJU'S overseas transactions, and it added another layer of legal and financial trouble to an already beleaguered company. The accusation of financial misconduct was a public relations disaster, and it all but sealed BYJU'S fate as a company on the brink of collapse. By the start of 2024, BYJU'S had emptied most of its offices across India. The once bustling headquarters in Bengaluru now sat nearly empty, with only a skeleton crew remaining. The company had gone from being India's most promising startup to a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition and unsustainable growth. The collapse of BYJU'S is more than just the downfall of a single company. It's a lesson for the entire EdTech industry. BYJU'S rose to prominence by tapping into a massive market, leveraging cutting-edge technology, and building an aggressive sales machine. But its rapid ascent came at a cost. In its pursuit of growth, the company lost sight of its core mission: to provide quality education. One of the key takeaways from BYJU'S story is the danger of overexpansion. While acquisitions can be a powerful way to grow a business, they also come with significant risks. BYJU'S bought up companies at a breakneck pace, often overpaying for businesses that didn't align with its core strengths. The result was a bloated, unwieldy company that struggled to integrate its acquisitions and manage its sprawling operations. Another lesson is the importance of customer trust. BYJU'S early success was built on its reputation as a trustworthy, innovative learning platform. But as the company grew, its aggressive sales tactics alienated many of its customers. Parents who had once been eager to invest in their children's education became wary of BYJU'S hard sell approach and its refusal to offer refunds or cancel subscriptions. In the end, the erosion of customer trust was one of the biggest factors in BYJU'S downfall. Perhaps the most important lesson from BYJU'S collapse is the need for sustainable growth. While it's tempting for startups to chase high valuations and rapid expansion, growth at all costs is not a viable long-term strategy. BYJU'S was able to secure massive amounts of funding during the EdTech boom, but when the market shifted and demand for online learning slowed, the company was left exposed. BYJU'S had bet on the idea that the future of education was entirely digital, but as the world returned to normal, it became clear that traditional learning environments still held significant value. For entrepreneurs and investors alike, BYJU'S serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of overconfidence and the risks of scaling too quickly. While innovation and ambition are crucial for success, they must be balanced with a clear focus on delivering value to customers and maintaining financial discipline. So, what do you think? Was BYJU'S downfall inevitable, or could they have changed course before it was too late? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any future updates. Check out the videos appearing on your screen right now for more insights and stories from the world of technology. This is the AI Lib. Stay tuned.